My name is Edwin Harrow and I'm a criminal defense lawyer. 3 days ago, my twin brother Raymond walked into my office covered in bruises so severe I barely recognized him. When he told me his son-in-law did this, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I swapped places with him, and I made damn sure his son-in-law would never forget it. When your identical twin shows up bleeding and broken, begging you not to call the police because he's too scared, something inside you just snaps. I've spent so many years putting criminals behind bars. Never did I think I'd have to become one to save my own brother, but here we are, and I'd do it all over again. I'm glad you are here. If you are watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached. Now, let me tell you exactly how I taught that little monster a lesson. I need you to understand something about me and my brother. We're not just twins. We're identical. Same face, same voice, same mannerisms. Growing up, even our parents couldn't tell us apart sometimes. We used to switch places in school, fool our teachers, play pranks on our friends. It was all fun and games back then, innocent. We were inseparable, two halves of the same soul. That's what our mom used to say. But life has a way of pulling people apart, doesn't it? After college, I went to law school. Leonard became a school teacher. I moved to the city, working 80-hour weeks at a law firm, clawing my way up. He stayed in our hometown teaching second graders how to read. While I was chasing success, he was chasing peace, a normal family life. Years drifted on, and I convinced myself distance was natural, but every holiday I noticed him growing dimmer, more withdrawn, as if someone were slowly turning down the light inside him. I ignored the signs, reassured myself that people change with age, that marriage and fatherhood could exhaust anyone. I was wrong. Raymond met Daniel Mercer years ago, a charming medical supply salesman who introduced himself with a polished smile and perfect manners. At first, Daniel seemed like the kind of man anyone would trust, the kind who held doors open and praised everyone around him. At their wedding he gave a speech about how my brother was the greatest blessing of his life, and I remember believing every word. Raymond deserved love, deserved peace, and I was relieved he had finally found it. I was blind. After the wedding came the slow divide, an inch at a time. Calls became infrequent, visits became shorter, and each time I saw him he looked a little smaller, as though life had hollowed something inside him. His daughter, my niece Elena, grew up cheerful and bright, completely unaware of the shadows creeping through their home. I told myself I was imagining things, but deep down I felt the truth pressing on me. Then came that Tuesday. I was sorting through paperwork when my assistant told me someone needed to see me urgently, and the tremor in her voice made my stomach twist. When Raymond walked in wearing sunglasses indoors and a heavy turtleneck in summer heat, I felt my breath catch. He limped, favoring one side, and for a moment I could not reconcile the battered figure in front of me with the brother I had known my whole life. I locked the door behind him, knowing instinctively that whatever he carried needed privacy. I told him to remove the sunglasses, but he only shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. So I took them off myself. What I saw will haunt me until my final day. The swollen eye, the cracked lip, the bruises shaped like hands tightening around his throat. His gaze, once filled with warmth, had gone empty, as though someone had taken something essential from him and left nothing but fear. I asked him who had done this, though I already knew. There was only one person with that kind of access, only one man who shared his home and his nights. Raymond tried to defend Daniel even then, whispering that he didn't want trouble, that he didn't want the police involved, that he was scared of what might happen if anyone found out. Hearing him say those words shattered something old inside me. I had spent my life defending the law, but in that moment I understood that the law could not reach into the dark corner my brother had been hiding in. I made a decision. I told Raymond to stay with me, to rest, to let me handle everything. For the first time in years he looked at me with the same trust he had when we were boys swapping seats in class. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I put on his clothes, fixed my posture to mirror his, and left my house with a fire inside me I had not felt in decades. I was not seeking justice in a courtroom. I was seeking something far older, far more primal. And when I reached Daniel's doorstep, the man who opened the door had no idea he was staring into the eyes of someone who loved Raymond enough to burn the world for him. When Daniel opened the door, he carried the smug confidence of a man who believed he could not be challenged. He assumed he was looking at Raymond, the same person he had beaten into silence. He was wrong. I stepped inside, calm and steady, letting him talk, letting him underestimate me. His voice faltered as he realized something in my eyes was different, something older and far less forgiving. I told him we were going to discuss what he had done, and for the first time I saw fear cracking through the shell he wore so confidently. He understood then that consequences had finally come, carried not by the brother he hurt but by me. My brother begged me not to call the police. His voice shook as he whispered, "Please, Edwin, don't. He'll not like it if anyone finds out." Hearing a 70-year-old man sound like a terrified child did something terrible to my chest, but I didn't let it show. I told him, in the same firm tone I used in court for half a century, "Roll up your sleeves." It wasn't a suggestion. It was the voice that made liars crumble on the stand. He froze, and that moment of hesitation told me more than any confession ever could. But I needed to see the truth. I needed the full, unfiltered horror. So I reached out and pushed his sleeves up myself, and dear God, what I uncovered made my stomach twist with a fury I haven't felt in decades. His arms were a battlefield of bruises, yellow ones fading into deep purple ones, layered over belt marks where he'd raised his arms to shield himself. Cigarette burns dotted his skin in neat little circles, like some sick map drawn by a monster. His knuckles were torn from blocking blows. Worst of all were the rope burns around his wrists. The bastard had tied him up. My twin. My other half. Something inside me did not break quietly. It shattered loud and violent. All the discipline, all the professional restraint I had built over a lifetime practicing law, burned away in an instant. This wasn't about a client. This wasn't about justice. This was about my brother, the man who shared my face, my history, my childhood. How long has this been happening? I forced out, jaw clenched. 3 years, he whispered. It started 6 months after the wedding. 3 years. 3 years of hell, hidden behind polite smiles and brief family visits. 3 years where I failed to notice. Tell me everything, I said. From the very beginning. Don't leave anything out. I need to understand what he's been doing to you. And so Raymond told me. He said it started small, almost invisible. His son-in-law, Patrick Malone, had framed control as concern. Patrick wanted to know where he was every moment, who he spoke to, what he did. He said it was love, protection, worry. Then came the comments about clothing, too loose, too sloppy, making him look weak, inviting disrespect. My brother changed the way he dressed. Then Patrick targeted his friends. Said they were bad influences. Said they were judging him. One by one, Raymond stopped seeing them. Then he targeted me. Patrick told him I made him feel inadequate, that my success overshadowed him, that I was condescending, even though none of that was true. Raymond stopped calling. Stopped visiting. And I let it happen because I was wrapped up in my own life. The first time Patrick hit him was over something so stupid it made me want to scream. Raymond forgot to take out the trash. Patrick came home drunk, saw the bins full, and snapped. He dragged my brother outside by the hair and slammed his face into the trash can, telling him that if he wanted to behave like garbage, he could live with it. The next morning came the tears and apologies and flowers. Classic manipulation. Raymond believed him. It didn't stop. Every time Patrick lost money gambling, and he gambled constantly, my brother paid the price. Every time Patrick had a bad day, my brother paid again. And then came the additional cruelty. Patrick's mother, Eleanor. She moved in a year into the marriage and turned the house into a nest of psychological torture. She criticized everything: Raymond's food, his cleaning, his posture, his breathing. According to her, he never contributed, never tried, never did enough, even though he worked full-time as a teacher and handled most responsibilities at home. Then Patrick's sister, Lila, moved in after her divorce. She treated Raymond like unpaid help, demanding meals, laundry, cleaning, and whenever he pushed back, she ran to her brother crying. Patrick would punish him for disrespecting family. So it wasn't one abuser. It was 3. 3 adults crushing one man day after day. But what made my blood boil the hottest was when Raymond told me what happened to his granddaughter, little Sophie. 5 years old. Bright, gentle, innocent, and she had been watching this nightmare unfold. Raymond's voice cracked when he said, "He hit her, Edwin." The words punched the air out of my lungs. Last night she was crying because she was scared. Patrick told her to shut up. When she couldn't stop, he slapped her. She's 5. My brother tried to protect her. Of course he did. And Patrick grabbed him by the throat, choked him until he couldn't breathe, and slammed his head against the counter over and over. And Eleanor and Lila just watched. Then they joined in. Hearing that snapped something ancient and ruthless awake inside me. I realized the law wasn't going to save him. But I could. And I would. Raymond told me how Lila once scratched him with a comb, and how Eleanor forced dirty dish rags into his mouth to silence his cries. He said he couldn't breathe, that the panic smothered him until his vision blurred and his hands shook uncontrollably. Hearing my brother describe that moment made something inside me twist. He looked exhausted, defeated, and older than his 70 years, as if the abuse had drained the life from him. He whispered, "I can't do this anymore, Edwin. I've tried leaving, but he always finds me. He drags me back and tells me that if I ever take Sophie away, he'll end me, and I believe him." His voice trembled with a hopelessness that tore through me. "I didn't know where else to go," he said, staring at his bruised hands. I looked at him and saw not my strong twin, but a man crushed beyond recognition. 3 years of cruelty had hollowed him out, leaving only fear where laughter used to live. I realized that if I didn't intervene, my brother would not survive much longer. So I told him the words that would change everything. "You're done suffering. Give me 3 days, just 3, and I promise he will never lay a hand on you again." Raymond stared at me like I had lost my mind, completely shocked. "I'm serious," I continued. "We're identical. We always have been. You're staying here where it's safe, and I'm going to take your place for 3 days. I'm walking into that house as you, and Patrick is going to regret every choice he ever made." He shook his head frantically. "Edwin, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He'll hurt you." But I felt nothing except resolve. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile I used on prosecutors right before dismantling their cases. "Let him try," I said. Raymond had always been gentle, soft-spoken, someone who built others up. But me. I'd spent years facing violent offenders in court. I'd trained my body through boxing 3 times a week. I knew how to take a hit, and how to deliver one. Walking into his house the next evening felt like stepping into a suffocating cave. From the outside, the place looked ordinary, nice lawn, tidy driveway, but inside it radiated dread. I had barely shut the door when Eleanor's sharp voice sliced through the silence. "Where have you been? Dinner isn't even started." I shrank myself, mimicking Raymond's timid posture, and entered the kitchen where she lounged with a drink. She didn't glance up as she ordered me to cook something decent. I opened the refrigerator, mentally cataloging everything like evidence. As I began preparing a meal, Lila wandered in, exactly as Raymond had described, dismissive, entitled, carrying an air of arrogance. She flopped onto the couch and demanded snacks as though she were royalty. I served her quietly, studying her face, committing every detail to memory for the reckoning I knew was coming. Then little Sophie appeared at the staircase. The moment I saw her, my heart clenched. She looked so much like Raymond as a child, those big eyes, that gentle expression, but dimmed by fear. She approached quietly, hoping not to upset anyone. When she whispered, "Grandpa," I knelt and opened my arms. She ran into me, trembling, and I held her close, making a silent vow that the cycle of fear would end right here, right now. At 8 o'clock, the garage door rumbled open. Patrick was home. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, preparing for the confrontation I had been planning since yesterday. The door slammed, and he entered already smelling of bourbon, irritation radiating off him. "Where's my dinner?" he barked. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself like a man used to intimidating anyone smaller. But tonight, He was meeting someone he couldn't scare. I turned toward him slowly, still in character as Raymond, but beneath that mask was a storm waiting to break. The way he stomped across the room, tossing his jacket aside, told me everything about the entitlement he lived inside. He looked at me with the same disdain he had shown my brother for years, fully expecting obedience. Instead, he was staring at a man who had walked into his home with a mission, a man who no longer feared him. He opened his mouth to shout again, but I stepped forward before he could. For the first time in years, someone met him eye to eye without flinching. I could see the confusion flicker in his expression, a crack in the confidence he wore like armor. He didn't know it yet, but the balance of power in that house had shifted completely. This time he wasn't facing the frightened man he tormented, he was facing me. I could feel Sophie watching from the stairs, her tiny hands gripping the railing as if the world depended on what happened next. That alone fueled me. I thought of Raymond sitting in my living room earlier, bruised, shaking, begging for help. I thought of every whispered apology he had ever made for wounds he didn't deserve. I thought of the years stolen from him by fear. And standing there in that dimly lit room, I made a promise to all of them. Patrick moved closer, trying to loom over me the way he had done to Raymond countless times, but I didn't step back. Instead, I lifted my chin slightly, meeting his glare with quiet defiance. For a moment he hesitated, clearly thrown off by the shift in energy. It dawned on him, in some small way, that something was different, that the man standing before him wasn't the helpless figure he was used to controlling. That flicker of uncertainty was exactly what I needed. I straightened my posture, letting the room fall silent as I spoke in a steady tone, warning him that his grip on this household was ending and that change would come. Patrick was the kind of man who could turn on charm like a switch, smooth talkers in hospitals, flattering doctors and nurses to push whatever his company needed sold. He knew how to hide the darkness beneath his polished suit, how to smile his way through rooms full of unsuspecting people. But I could see him clearly, the real him, the person burrowed beneath all that practiced charisma. The mask didn't fool me for a second. "It's ready," I said quietly as I set his dinner on the table. I'd cooked steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans, but I deliberately held back on seasoning. Not enough to make it obvious, but enough for him to notice something was off. He sat down without acknowledging anyone at the table, not a thank you, not a glance. He cut into the steak, took one bite, and immediately his expression twisted. "What is this?" he snapped, spitting the food back onto the plate. "This tastes like plain cardboard. Can't you do anything right?" Right on cue, Eleanor chimed in, her voice dripping with criticism. "That's what I've been saying, Patrick. He can't cook, he can't clean, I don't know what you see in him." Lila laughed from the couch, tossing out her usual cheap insult. "He can't do anything besides take care of kids." Patrick stood abruptly, and that's when I saw the shift in his posture, the spark of aggression he kept simmering just under the surface. He walked toward me with the swagger of someone used to dominating the people around him. He expected Raymond to shrink, to beg, to scramble to apologize. But I didn't move. I didn't cower. I stood still, looking him directly in the eyes. "I work all day," he growled, voice low and menacing. "I pay for everything. I keep this house running. And this is how you repay me. With garbage." Then he raised his hand. I had been waiting for this moment. 3 years of hearing what he'd done to my brother had prepared me. His first move was always the same, an open-handed slap meant to degrade more than injure. As his hand came toward my face, I lifted mine and caught his wrist midair. The shock on his face was priceless. He was used to overpowering someone smaller than him, someone frightened and worn down. But I wasn't Raymond. I trained. I boxed. And more importantly, I had been carrying years of anger on my back. I tightened my grip, not enough to injure, but enough to make him feel powerless for the first time in a very long time. Enough for him to understand that the balance in this house had shifted. "Not tonight, Patrick," I said softly, my tone calm but edged with steel. "I've had a long day too." He tried to yank his wrist free but couldn't, yet my grip held firm, anchored by a resolve he never expected from me. His face flushed with a blend of embarrassment and anger, a volatile combination for a man who relied on intimidation more than honesty. He used his free hand to pry at my fingers, trying desperately to peel my hold away, but nothing budged. I let him struggle for a few seconds, just long enough to make my point unmistakable, before I finally released him. Patrick stumbled backward, cradling his wrist as though it were shattered, staring at me as if I had transformed into someone he no longer recognized. Eleanor gasped theatrically, one hand flying to her chest. "Raymond, how dare you put your hands on my son?" she cried, dripping with false outrage. Lila bolted upright on the couch, eyes wide with indignation. "You've lost your mind," she shouted. But Patrick didn't say a word. He only glared, breathing in sharp, angry bursts, trying to process what had just happened. I could see the calculations behind his eyes, the frantic search for a way to reassert the control he believed he owned. But this time, I had thrown him completely off balance. "Dinner's getting cold," I said, my tone deliberately calm. "You all should sit and eat." Then I turned away and walked out of the room, leaving a silence so heavy it almost echoed. For the first time in years, they didn't know what I would do next. For the first time ever, they weren't sure they had the upper hand. Upstairs, I tucked little Sophie into bed, reading her one of my favorite childhood stories, one about a brave girl who saves herself when everyone else fails her. It felt fitting tonight. Sophie drifted to sleep with her small hand wrapped tightly around mine, trusting me completely. I stayed for a moment, listening to her soft breathing and wondering how many nights she had fallen asleep to the sound of yelling downstairs. Not tonight. And I promised myself, not ever again. Around 11, the hallway outside the bedroom creaked with the sound of approaching footsteps. 2 sets. Slow, deliberate, purposeful. Eleanor and Lila. They were coming to put me back in line, to restore the hierarchy they depended on. I had expected this moment from the second I walked away earlier. People like them don't tolerate disruption. And tonight, I had shaken the entire foundation of their comfortable little dominant structure. I stepped out into the hallway, closing Sophie's door behind me with deliberate gentleness so she wouldn't stir. The 2 women stood there waiting, arms crossed, faces carved into matching masks of disapproval and hostility. Their postures screamed confrontation. Their eyes screamed entitlement. "We need to talk," Eleanor said sharply, each word clipped. "About what?" I replied evenly, refusing to let my voice waver. "Your attitude," Lila snapped, stepping forward. "About what you did downstairs. You think you can humiliate Patrick like that in his own home?" "The house that's legally in my name," I corrected quietly. "Let's stay accurate." Eleanor's face reddened instantly. "That house was paid for with my son's money," she hissed. "Actually," I said, letting my attorney's cadence slide naturally into place, "the down payment came from my parents. The deed lists me as the sole owner. Legally speaking, this is my house. You and your daughter are guests, guests who do not contribute rent, utilities, childcare, groceries, or anything resembling responsibility." The 2 women exchanged startled, unsettled glances. Raymond had never spoken to them like this. He had never even known most of these details. But I wasn't Raymond, not in the ways that mattered tonight. "I don't know what's gotten into you," Eleanor said, stepping closer, her voice low and threatening. "But this ends now." Lila moved to my side, attempting to corner me against the wall. "Patrick is too soft on you," she said coldly. "Someone needs to remind you how to behave." Then she shoved me, testing me, provoking me, searching for the old passiveness she expected. I didn't move. She expected me to recoil, to apologize, to shrink back into the obedient version of the man she thought she controlled. Instead, I stayed still, letting the shove pass through me without reaction. The hallway light flickered, stretching shadows across the walls and tightening the air around us. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she realized something had shifted for good. "You're playing a dangerous game," she warned, her voice tight. "Patrick doesn't tolerate disrespect. Our family doesn't tolerate challenges." "I'm not challenging anything," I replied. "I'm finally drawing lines that should have been there all along." Lila laughed sharply. "Lines? Don't pretend you've suddenly grown a spine. You've always been weak. Patrick told us everything. You should be grateful he even deals with you." Her words were meant to cut, but they had no weight anymore. I studied both of them, feeling a steady calm settle in me. "Patrick didn't marry someone weak," I said. "He married someone he assumed he could silence. That's his error. You think you can manage this house without us?" Eleanor snapped. "I've been managing despite you," I answered. The balance had changed, and they knew it. "Everything is different now because of tonight." "Don't touch me again," I said, my voice ice cold. "Or what?" she snapped, shoving me harder this time. I still didn't move. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by something else. Concern. "Let me explain something to both of you," I said slowly, letting the full weight of my voice settle over them. "I've documented every bruise, every injury, every incident of mistreatment over the past 3 years. I told them I had photographs, copies of clinic visits, and statements from neighbors who had heard the shouting through the walls. All of it clearly added up to serious domestic abuse." Eleanor opened her mouth to interrupt, but I kept speaking. I wasn't finished. I told them that the two of them were not just bystanders, they were contributors. They had encouraged the mistreatment. They had participated in it. Earlier that night, they had even put their hands on me themselves. In our state, that meant aiding and assisting in a felony. That meant they were legally responsible for their part in everything. When I explained that the charge for this kind of involvement could carry 5 to 10 years behind bars, both women lost their color. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, keeping my voice steady and controlled. "You're both going to go back to your rooms. You're not going to touch me. You're not going to threaten me. And tomorrow, we're going to discuss the future of this entire household." They stared at me like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Eleanor finally managed to speak. You can't prove any of that." I smiled faintly. "I'm an attorney, Eleanor. Proof is what I've done for a living for decades." I turned away and went back into Sophie's room, closing the door and leaving them frozen in the hallway, still processing the shift that had happened. That moment marked the first real confrontation. The moment I made it clear that the old order had collapsed, that Raymond was not going to live a life of fear anymore. But I knew this wasn't the end. Patrick would never accept that shift quietly. His pride wouldn't allow it. Abusers cling to control like oxygen, and I had taken a large chunk of it away in one evening. The only question was how he would respond. I got my answer early the next morning. I woke before everyone else, made breakfast for Sophie, and helped her get ready for school. Eleanor and Lila avoided me entirely, whispering behind closed doors. Patrick had slept on the couch, too confused and too embarrassed to face anyone the night before. But when I returned after dropping Sophie off at school, he was waiting, sober, tense, and visibly determined to reclaim control. "We need to talk," he said sharply. "In the bedroom. Now." I followed him upstairs and closed the door behind us. Patrick didn't waste a second. He grabbed my arm with the same harsh grip he'd used on Raymond countless times. His fingers pressed into my skin with enough force to bruise. "I don't know what's gotten into you," he said, leaning in so close I could feel his breath. "But it ends today. Right now. You're my spouse. You follow my rules. You show respect. You know your place." "You're hurting me, Patrick," I said calmly. "Good," he muttered, squeezing harder. "Maybe you'll remember this." But I didn't resist. I didn't pull away. I let him tighten his grip. I let him leave fresh marks layered over the old ones Raymond already carried. Because everything he was doing, every word, every action, was being captured. The small camera I had placed in the corner was recording the entire conversation. And the audio recorder in my pocket captured the rest. Evidence. Always building evidence. He kept going, voice rising. "You think you can suddenly act bold? Think you can grow a backbone? You're nothing without me. Nothing. You were barely getting by when I met you. A teacher with no future, raising a kid alone. I gave you everything. Is that really how you see it?" I asked quietly. That pushed him over the edge. He pulled back his arm, fist clenched this time, preparing to strike. And that's when I moved. I had let him think I was powerless. Let him believe he still had control. But I shifted my weight, blocked his arm, and used his momentum against him. With one swift movement, I swept his legs. Patrick, 6'2" and 200 pounds, hit the floor hard. I stood over him and said, "Don't ever try that again." Then I stepped out of the room, leaving him stunned and furious. That was the moment he realized he couldn't overpower me physically anymore. And when abusers lose physical dominance, they turn to manipulation. So he did exactly what I expected. He called the police. When Patrick called the police, he did it with the confidence of a man who believed the world would always take his side. He dialed with shaking hands, not from fear, but from the performance of fear. He filled his voice with trembling desperation, telling the dispatcher that I had attacked him, that I was unstable, that he no longer felt safe. He even pressed a hand to the wall and staggered theatrically as if barely holding himself upright. It was an act he had perfected over years of manipulating anyone who questioned him. Eleanor and Lila hovered close, whispering instructions, adding dramatic gasps at all the right moments. Their earlier panic had transformed into a renewed determination. If Patrick fell, they fell with him, and they knew it. But I didn't interrupt. I let them rehearse their roles. I let them believe their performance was airtight. When he hung up, Patrick squared his shoulders and gave me a smug smile. "They'll believe me," he said confidently. "I'm the one who called. I'm the victim here." "You should hope they don't review the last 24 hours too closely," I replied. That wiped the smile from his face. The police arrived 15 minutes later. The knock was sharp, professional, and sent a ripple of tension through the entire house. Eleanor flinched. Lila backed away from the door. Patrick inhaled deeply, preparing his wounded husband routine. Standard procedure. They separated us immediately. One officer took Patrick to the living room while the other motioned for me to step outside. The morning air was cool and grounding. "Tell me what happened," the officer said. And I did, methodically, clearly, like someone presenting a case in court. I showed them the footage captured that morning. Patrick gripping my arm hard enough to bruise, Patrick threatening me, Patrick preparing to strike. I played the audio recording with every incriminating word. I explained the pattern of abuse, the documented clinic visits, the testimonies from neighbors. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. The officers exchanged a long, deliberate look. Inside, Patrick began raising his voice, demanding to know why they were wasting time. He insisted that he was the real victim. He pointed to the faint red marks he had rubbed into his own skin. He tried to sound cooperative while simultaneously talking over the officers. But when they came back outside and handed me my phone, their decision was already made. They walked into the living room with calm authority. "Patrick," one officer said, "please stand and turn around." His jaw dropped. "What? No, you don't understand. I'm the one who called." "We've reviewed the evidence," the officer replied. "Turn around." Eleanor started crying. Lila began shouting. Patrick looked between them wildly, searching for someone to fix this for him, to rewrite reality the way he usually could. But no one could save him from the truth. The officers cuffed him as he protested, insisting that I had manipulated everything. But every word he spoke only confirmed the behavior they had already witnessed on video. As they walked him out the door, he looked back at me with pure hatred, but beneath it, unmistakable fear. And for the first time, the house felt still. Not tense. Not dangerous. Just quiet. A quiet that felt like the first breath of a life finally beginning. Finally, truly free. 2 officers arrived about an hour later. One older, one younger. Patrick put on a dramatic display, claiming I had attacked him, saying I had lost control, insisting he feared for his safety. But when they approached me, I met them at the door with a thick folder in my hands. "Officers," I said calmly, "my husband called you because I defended myself when he tried to harm me. Before you take his statement, There's something I want to show you. I opened the folder, revealing years of evidence. Clinic visits explained away as accidents, photos of injuries, records of broken bones, bruises, burns. The older officer's expression shifted immediately. He'd seen this pattern countless times. He knew what he was looking at. "Ma'am," he said gently, "how long has this been happening?" 3 years, I said softly. He grabs me. He chokes me. He threatens me if I ever try to leave. Then I showed them the video from that morning. Patrick's grip on my arm, his threats, his attempt to raise a fist. All captured in clear detail. The younger officer looked unsettled. The older one looked genuinely troubled. "Mr. Mercer," the veteran said sternly, "given this evidence, you're fortunate we aren't placing you in handcuffs right now." Then he turned to me. "Do you want to file charges?" "Not yet," I said. "I just want him to know someone is watching now. And if he touches me again, there will be consequences." The officer faced Patrick, who was pale and shaking with humiliation. "Sir, we'll be filing a full report. If we're called back to this address, if anything happens, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Patrick nodded silently, anger and fear woven together behind his eyes. I told them I had photographs, clinic reports, and statements from neighbors who had heard the shouting through the walls. Real evidence, hard evidence, the kind that could not be talked away or swept under a rug. As I spoke, I saw Eleanor's mouth twitch like she wanted to jump in, but I didn't give her the chance. I kept talking, kept pushing. I told both her and Lila that what they had done wasn't just morally rotten, it was criminal. They weren't innocent bystanders. They were participants, encouragers, active helpers in the suffering of my brother. They had laid hands on me earlier themselves, thinking I was Raymond. That made them part of the pattern. And in our state, participating in repeated physical harm wasn't a small mistake, it was a felony. 5 to 10 years behind bars, minimum. Their faces drained of color so fast it was almost startling. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, keeping my voice calm and steady. "You're both going to go to your rooms. You're not going to touch me. You're not going to raise your voices, threaten me, or even step near me. And tomorrow, we're going to discuss the future of this household in a very serious way. Are we clear?" Eleanor sputtered, finally finding her voice. You can't prove any of that." I gave her a cool smile. "I'm an attorney, Eleanor. Proving things is my entire profession." Then I turned and walked right past them, back into Sophie's room, closing the door behind me. They stayed frozen in the hallway, silent and stunned. That was confrontation number 1. I needed them to understand the old balance of power was over. Raymond was not going to live like that anymore. But I also knew it wasn't finished. Patrick wasn't the type of man to take a challenge quietly. His pride, his ego, his need to dominate, none of it would let him walk away. He would retaliate. The only question was when and how. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning began peacefully. I woke early, cooked breakfast for Sophie, helped her get ready, brushed her hair, made sure her backpack was zipped. Eleanor and Lila kept their distance, whispering behind doors like children afraid of consequences. Patrick had passed out on the couch, too embarrassed or confused to confront me the night before. But when I came home after taking Sophie to school, he was waiting at the base of the stairs, eyes red but clear. He'd sobered up. Not for clarity, no, for control. "We need to talk," he said sharply. "In the bedroom. Now." I followed him upstairs. He shut the door behind us, turned, and immediately grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my skin with that same bruising pressure he'd used on Raymond countless times. He leaned close, face twisted with bitterness. "I don't know what's gotten into you," he hissed. "But it stops today. You hear me? You're my spouse. You behave. You follow my rules. You show respect. You know your place." "You're hurting me, Patrick," I said softly. "Good." His grip tightened, almost gleefully. "Maybe you'll remember this the next time you think about embarrassing me." But I didn't pull away. I didn't struggle. I let him squeeze until I could feel the bruise forming. Because the small camera hidden in the corner was recording everything. And the audio recorder in my pocket was capturing every word. Evidence. Always more evidence. Patrick kept ranting, voice rising, spitting insults that came straight from his warped sense of entitlement. You think you can suddenly act strong? Think you can develop a backbone? You are nothing without me. Nothing. You were barely scraping by when I met you. An old man teaching kids, making pocket change, raising your granddaughter alone. I gave you everything. Is that really what you believe? I asked quietly. That set him off. He pulled back his arm, fist clenched, ready to strike. And that was the moment I moved. Up until then I'd let him believe he still had control. But I shifted my stance, blocked his arm, and used the momentum of his own weight. One swift movement, years of practice in the gym paying off, and Patrick hit the floor hard. 6'2", 200 pounds, sprawled across the carpet like a toppled statue. I stood over him, breathing steadily. Don't ever try that again. Then I left the room, letting him sit there in shock. That was the moment he realized he couldn't intimidate me physically anymore. And once abusers lose that leverage, they look for a different angle. I knew what was coming even before it happened. He called the police. They arrived an hour later. 2 officers, one older and seasoned, the other young. Patrick claimed I had attacked him out of nowhere, said I was unstable, said he feared for his safety. But when they asked for my side, I greeted them with a folder already in my hands. Officers, I said gently, my husband called you because I pushed him away after he tried to strike me. Before you take statements, I'd like you to see this. Inside the folder were copies of medical exams, injury photos, clinic visits from the past 3 years, each one labeled as an accident. I watched the older officer's expression shift as he flipped through them. He knew the truth when he saw it. How long has this been happening? He asked softly. 3 years, I replied. He grabs me. He threatens me. This morning, he tried to hit me again. Then I showed them the recording from the hidden camera. Patrick grabbing my arm, threatening me, raising his fist. The younger officer looked shaken. The older one looked furious. Mr. Mercer, the veteran said firmly, given this evidence, you're lucky we're not arresting you right now. He turned to me. Do you want to press charges? Not yet, I said. I want him to know someone is watching now. If he touches me again, I will. The officer nodded and gave Patrick a long, hard look. Sir, if we are called back to this address for anything at all, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Patrick stood there pale, humiliated, and speechless as the officers left. And just like that, the balance had shifted again. Grant's hands trembled as he stared at me. His face drained of every ounce of confidence he'd once swung around like a weapon. Who are you? He stammered, voice cracking under the weight of fear he'd never expected to feel. I gave him a small, calm smile. My name is Edwin Harrow, I said. 70 years old, retired criminal defense attorney, and the identical twin brother of the man you've been abusing for 3 long years. The room froze. Raymond stood beside me, quiet and shaking, but alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. Across the table, Grant, Eleanor, and Lila stared like I had revealed myself as a ghost. You tricked us, Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. I did, I replied. And every single bit of evidence I've gathered is completely admissible in court. Every camera, every recording device, every photograph was taken inside a property legally owned by my brother. Nothing you say or do can erase that. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, real ones. Not the dramatic, manipulative tears she used whenever she wanted sympathy, but sharp, terrified ones. You can't do this, she cried. You can't destroy our family. Destroy your family? I repeated, letting out a humorless laugh. You destroyed it yourselves the moment you decided to treat my brother like he was less than human. When you beat him, choked him, controlled him, belittled him, and let your son lay hands on a 5-year-old child, your own granddaughter. Don't you dare pretend I'm the one tearing anything apart. I pulled out a neatly organized stack of paperwork, divorce papers, separation terms, and custody agreements, all prepared the night before. Here's how this is going to go, I said. You have two choices. Just two. Their eyes locked on me with dread. Choice number one, I continued. I walk into the district attorney's office first thing Monday morning and hand over everything I've collected. I file charges for domestic abuse, battery, child endangerment, attempted poisoning, conspiracy, coercion, and a dozen additional crimes between the three of you. Their shoulders slumped simultaneously, the weight of consequences finally hitting them. Between all of you, you're looking at 40 to 60 years behind bars, I added, not raising my voice but letting the words land with the heaviness they deserved. Grant, big, loud, violent Grant, began to cry. Not gentle tears, but shaking sobs, the kind that came from someone who had always felt powerful and was now meeting the truth of his own actions. Or, I said, shifting to the second set of documents, choice number two. I placed the divorce papers in front of him. You sign these. Today. Right now. You give up all rights. Full custody of little Sophia goes to Raymond. No visitation. You'll pay child support every month. That adds up to 13 years of payments, totaling $378,000. Eleanor broke into fresh sobs. Lila began pacing, clutching her hair. The house stays with Raymond, I added. It's already in his name. You, Eleanor, and Lila have 24 hours to pack and leave. And I'll have restraining orders filed for all three of you. You don't come within 500 feet of my brother or his child. Grant's voice cracked. We don't have that kind of money. I smiled again, slowly, deliberately. Yes, you do. I've reviewed your finances. Your retirement account alone holds nearly $40,000. Eleanor has a workers' compensation settlement from her late husband, $900,000, hidden in a jar in the backyard shed. Eleanor gasped, hands slapped over her mouth. How did you? I'm thorough, I said simply. You'll liquidate whatever you need. Take loans. Sell valuables. I don't care how you get the money. But if you don't, I hand everything to the DA, and prison takes care of the rest. And trust me, none of you will enjoy what prison feels like. Silence filled the room. Heavy, suffocating silence. They finally understood. They had no control left, no leverage, no excuses. You have until 5 o'clock today to choose, I said, gathering the evidence and tucking it into my bag. If you choose option 2, we finalize the paperwork and visit the bank. If you refuse or stall or lie to me, I make a phone call, and all of you are in handcuffs by dinner time. I turned and headed for the door. I'm going to pick up Sophia from school now. When I get back, I'll expect your decision. As I stepped outside, the cold afternoon air hit my face, but it felt refreshing, a reminder that the world outside their toxic little kingdom still existed, still breathed, still offered freedom. Raymond followed me out onto the porch, his hands shaking, his eyes shining with something between disbelief and hope. Edwin. I don't know what to say, he whispered. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to say anything. You've survived more than anyone should ever endure. Now it's time to rebuild. He nodded, swallowing hard. Do you really think they'll leave? They'll choose the option that keeps them out of prison, I said confidently. Cowards always do. Raymond let out a soft, shaky laugh, his first genuine one in years. You always were the bold one. No, I corrected gently. I just never had to unlearn fear the way you did. We walked together to the car, and for a moment, he hesitated before getting in. What if they try something while we're gone? They won't, I said. Right now they're too terrified to breathe without wondering what I'll do next. The drive to Sophia's school was quiet but peaceful. When she ran into Raymond's arms at dismissal, her smile brighter than the sun itself, I saw the exact reason I had stepped into his life after all those years apart. Children deserve homes where they aren't afraid. Fathers deserve lives where they aren't beaten into silence. On the way back, Sophia chattered happily about her day. Raymond listened, hanging on to every word like it was a miracle. And in many ways, it was. But the moment we pulled into the driveway, all three of us fell quiet. Grant's truck was gone. Inside the house, the energy had shifted. Eleanor and Lila sat at the kitchen table, eyes puffy, paperwork spread out in front of them. They looked smaller than before, deflated balloons whose air had finally leaked out. Eleanor spoke first. "We'll sign," she said, voice hollow. "But we want time to gather our things." "You have 24 hours, I said, just as calm as before. Lila glared at me with red, furious eyes. "You're ruining everything." "No," I replied. "I'm ending the cycle." Grant returned half an hour later. He looked like he'd aged a decade in one afternoon. His hands were shaking, his face blotchy. Without a word, he signed the divorce papers, the custody agreements, the financial disclosures. Every signature was another chain snapping free from Raymond's life. When he finished, he shoved the pen away and muttered, "You think you've won." "This isn't about winning," I said. "It's about safety." He looked up at me, hatred burning deep. "You're going to regret this." I met his glare without flinching. "No. But you might regret what you'd already done." Eleanor dragged a suitcase from the hallway. Lila grabbed a trash bag full of clothes. Grant stormed off to pack. It was chaotic, desperate, messy, the unraveling of a tyrant's empire. Raymond stood behind me, watching it all unfold with trembling hands. I turned to him. "You're free," I said quietly. His breath hitched. "I don't know how to be free." "You'll learn," I promised. "Starting today." The house felt lighter, as though years of darkness had finally lifted. For the first time, hope settled into the walls, quiet but steady, waiting. Leaving the three of them terrified at that table felt strangely quiet. After years of watching them bully and torment others, seeing fear in their faces was almost surreal. I stepped outside with a deep breath. The sky looked brighter than it had in months. Driving to Sophia's school, I realized something. I had done it. In just 72 hours, I had dismantled 3 years of cruelty, manipulation, and fear. And yet I knew there was still one final moment left, the moment when Raymond would reclaim his life. I brought Sophia back to my apartment, my real home, where Raymond was waiting. When they saw each other, the reunion was almost too emotional to watch. Sophia ran to her grandfather, clinging to him with a joy that nearly broke me. Raymond held her tight, tears falling into her curly hair. "Grandpa, you look different," she said softly. "You look happy." Raymond sobbed into her shoulder. "I am, sweetheart. I finally am." We let her watch her favorite cartoon while Raymond and I talked quietly in the kitchen. "It's almost over," I told him. "Tonight, you'll be free." "What did you do?" he asked, tears still drying on his face. "Everything necessary," I said. "Nothing more, nothing less." At 4:30, my phone rang. It was Grant. "We'll sign," he said, voice empty, defeated. "We'll do whatever you want. Just don't send us away." "I'll be there in half an hour," I said. Raymond came with me. He needed to be there. We walked into the house together, 2 identical men, side by side, united. The look on their faces when they saw us both was priceless. Confusion, horror, realization. "Hello, Grant," Raymond said softly. Grant stared, his mouth opening and closing helplessly. I spread the papers on the table. "Sign here. Here. And initial there." His hand shook violently as he picked up the pen. He looked at the papers, then at me, rage flickering through his humiliation. "I could destroy you for this," he whispered. I leaned in, steady as stone. "Try it," I said. "Please. Try." "Give me a reason to skip the civil route and go straight to criminal charges," I said quietly, leaning forward across the table. "Please. I'm begging you." My voice was calm, steady, almost too controlled for the amount of fire burning inside me. Grant froze, his jaw trembling, and then, slowly, his resistance cracked. He picked up the pen with a shaky hand and began signing. Every page. Every signature line. Every initial. His handwriting wavered like the last flicker of a dying flame, but he signed all of it. Eleanor was next. I slid the documents in front of her. A formal agreement requiring her to vacate the house, surrender any claim to the property, and stay away from Raymond and little Sophia permanently. She shot me a look filled with pure venom as she signed. "You're evil," she hissed. "You're a devil." "No," I said softly. "I'm justice. There's a difference." Lila signed her agreement without speaking. She looked drained, defeated, a woman who had spent years feeding off the power of intimidation and suddenly had nothing left. Whatever pride she once had was gone. She simply scribbled her name and pushed the documents away. Once everything was signed, I gathered the papers neatly and slid them into my bag. "These are legal, binding, enforceable. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to be out of this house. Take your belongings. Nothing that belongs to Raymond or Sophia. I'll be here with a sheriff's deputy to supervise. If you're not out by then, you'll be removed by force." Grant rose slowly from his chair. He was a large man, tall, heavy, broad-shouldered. For a moment, I thought he might lash out, try to reclaim his dominance with one last desperate act. I felt my muscles tense in anticipation, ready to meet him head-on. But he didn't move toward me. He simply stared, hollow and defeated. "Who are you?" he whispered. "What kind of person does this?" "The kind who loves his brother," I said. "The kind who protects his family. The kind who doesn't let monsters win." I took Raymond's hand. "Come on. Let's go home." We walked out of that house together. Two 70-year-old men who had survived more than most people ever would, and we left behind 3 years of torment, fear, and manipulation. We walked toward freedom. The next day, I arrived at the house at exactly 5 o'clock with a sheriff's deputy beside me. The place was empty. They had cleared out, likely retreating to one of Eleanor's relatives' homes across town. Good. Let distance grow between them and the people they hurt. I immediately changed the locks, installed a full security system, and set up visible cameras. No more hidden ones. I wanted Raymond and Sophia to feel safe, truly safe, for the first time in years. Over the next several weeks, I watched my brother transform. His shoulders lifted. His voice regained strength. He started smiling again, not those forced, frightened smiles he had worn for 3 years, but genuine ones that reached his eyes. He laughed. He cooked meals with me in the kitchen. He played with Sophia without glancing over his shoulder. He returned to his teaching job and found joy in it again. Little Sophia changed too. The fear slowly drained from her face. She stopped flinching when someone closed a door too loudly. She made new friends at school. She drew pictures of herself and her grandfather, with bright colors, wide smiles, and sunny skies. Every drawing was a reminder that children heal fastest when the darkness is finally gone. Of course, Grant tried to fight the custody arrangements. Men like him always try. But I represented Raymond in family court, and I brought every piece of evidence I had collected. Medical files, photographs, videos, statements. The judge didn't hesitate. He terminated Grant's parental rights immediately. No visits. No calls. No involvement. Nothing. The monthly child support payments began soon after. Grant had to sell his car, cash out his retirement account, take loans, whatever it took to meet the court order. Good. Let him learn what it felt like to lose control, to struggle, to face consequences. Eleanor filed for bankruptcy after her hidden savings had to be liquidated. Lila moved back in with her ex-husband, which, from what I knew, carried its own set of miseries. The 3 of them were scattered, fractured, no longer able to band together as a unit of cruelty. And Raymond? He was thriving. 6 months later, he met someone new, a kind-hearted man named Walter, another teacher, someone patient, gentle, and warm. I checked everything, of course. Background, history, reputation. Clean. Safe. Good. They were taking things slowly, and Raymond wasn't rushing into anything. He might never marry again, and that was perfectly fine. He didn't need another partner to define him. He was whole on his own. But seeing him open himself to the possibility of trust again, that was the real victory. Not the legal documents. Not the restraining orders. Not the terrified looks on his abusers' faces. The true triumph was watching my brother rediscover who he had been before Grant tried to break him. People sometimes ask me whether I regret it, whether I regret going undercover, impersonating my brother, strategically gathering evidence, becoming something close to a vigilante. And my answer remains the same. No. Not for a single moment. Because here's what most people don't understand about domestic abuse. The system protects abusers far more often than it protects victims. Victims are forced to document everything, file reports, gather evidence, call for help repeatedly. And even when they do everything right, their abusers walk free, again and again. Raymond tried to leave mentally 100 times before he could leave physically. And if he had tried the proper way, he might not have survived. The system failed him. So I became the system. I became his protection. I became his justice. Some of you listening will think I went too far, that I should have called the police earlier, handled things the official way. Let me tell you how the official way works. The police come, write a report, maybe arrest the abuser, maybe not. And if they do, he's back home within hours. And the victim pays the price for daring to ask for help. Restraining orders may look official when printed, but in reality, they're nothing more than thin sheets of paper. They can't stop a determined man from breaking down a door. They can't shield someone from fists or fury. They can't block a bullet if a violent person decides to escalate. And the family court system? That's a maze that seems designed to confuse victims while giving abusers every chance to manipulate the narrative. Men like Grant know how to lie, how to perform charm, how to twist truth until judges and caseworkers start doubting the very people who need protection. It's heartbreaking to watch how easily abusers convince the system that they're the reasonable ones, that their victims are unstable, confused, or dramatic. Too often, they walk away with joint custody. They get visitation rights. They maintain access to the very people they've spent years terrorizing. So no, I don't regret stepping outside the usual channels. I don't regret taking action into my own hands. If I hadn't, my twin brother would still be trapped in that house, still enduring Grant's cruelty, still believing escape was impossible. And little Sophia would have grown up thinking that fear was normal, that shouting was love, and that control was the same as care. I shattered that cycle. In 3 days, I crushed a pattern that could have lasted generations. Do you know what Sophia told me last week? We were at the park. Just me, Raymond, and that precious little girl. We sat together on a quiet bench, eating ice cream while we watched other children run around and laugh without fear. Sophia tugged on my sleeve, looked up at me with those bright hazel eyes, and said, "Uncle Edwin, thank you for saving Grandpa." I froze. I asked what she meant, and she said, "I used to be scared all the time. Scared of Daddy. Scared of Grandma. Scared to make noise. Scared to smile. But I'm not scared anymore. Grandpa's not sad anymore. And it's because of you. That is why I did it. For moments like that. For a 5-year-old who can finally sleep through the night without worrying she'll wake up to shouting. To anyone watching this who might be living through something similar, listen closely. Maybe you're being hurt by someone you truly loved once. Maybe you feel trapped, like every day drains a little more strength from you. Maybe you've tried to leave before but were pulled back with apologies or threats. Maybe you're listening to my voice with your abuser in the next room, hoping they won't overhear anything that might spark their anger. Hear me clearly. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve calm. You deserve a life where your heartbeat isn't tied to someone else's temper. I know it feels impossible sometimes. Abusers are experts at convincing their victims that escape is hopeless. They tell you you're nothing without them. They insist no one else will care for you, that you're unlovable, unstable, or dramatic. They isolate you from people who might help. They track your movements, manage your finances, read your messages, cut you off from anyone who could offer a safe place. They threaten to hurt you, hurt your family, Or take your children if you try to leave. They use the same playbook every time. But here's what they don't want you to realize. You can get out. You can survive. You can rebuild. It isn't easy. It will be the hardest thing you ever do. But it is possible. I watched Raymond claw his way back from the edge. If you don't have a twin brother like me to step in, that's okay. You can still be your own rescuer. Start small. Document everything. Take photos of every bruise, every damaged item, every threatening message. Store them somewhere safe, somewhere he cannot reach. Build your file piece by piece. Reach out to domestic violence resources. Many organizations offer shelters, advocates, and safety planning strategies. They understand exactly what you're facing. Speak with a lawyer if you can. Many offer free consultations for victims. Know your rights. Learn what evidence you need. Save money in secret if it's safe to do so. Even a little each week matters. Build your escape plan carefully, quietly, and intentionally. And when you're ready, leave. Don't look back. I won't lie to you. Leaving is dangerous. The moment a victim breaks free is when abusers often become the most unpredictable, the most violent. But staying is almost always more deadly in the long run. Raymond stayed for 3 years. 3 years of escalating harm. Had he stayed longer, Grant would have destroyed him. We both know that. He left, and although Grant tried to retaliate, Raymond survived. He's healing. He's thriving. If you're not the one in an abusive relationship but someone you care about might be, then this part is for you. Pay attention. Look closer. Victims often hide their suffering with fake smiles, excuses, long sleeves, and canceled plans. Don't ignore the subtle signs. Don't brush off the sinking feeling that something is wrong. Don't tell yourself it's private or that they'll ask for help if they need it. Find a quiet moment. Gently ask, "Are you safe? Is he hurting you?" Those 4 words can open the door to truth. If they confide in you, believe them. Don't blame them for staying. Don't push them into decisions they're not ready to make. Offer resources. Offer an open door. Offer presence. And if you have skills, authority, or strength, use them. Some people need someone in their corner who refuses to look away. The system fails people like Raymond every day. Courts fail them. Police reports fail them. Society fails them. So we must become the safety net. We must be the people who step forward when the system steps back. We have to be willing to step beyond our comfort as individuals and confront realities most people avoid. Domestic violence is never a private misunderstanding. It becomes a spreading wound that touches entire families, neighborhoods, and communities. It echoes through generations, shaping children, silencing adults, and weakening every place where fear replaces safety. That is why all of us share responsibility. Violence behind closed doors is still violence, and it must be challenged by more than sympathy. It needs action, intention, and the courage to step into darkness for someone who cannot yet step out. I once believed the law alone could fix everything. I thought that if we simply enforced existing statutes, prosecuted more offenders, and demanded harsher sentences, abuse would disappear. But I learned that the law is only a tool, and a tool is useless if the person who needs it is too frightened or controlled to lift it. Victims often cannot speak, cannot plan, cannot defend themselves. So sometimes someone else has to pick up that tool and use it on their behalf. That is what I did for my brother. I lifted the law like a shield and a sword, wielding it against his abusers with precision. And I would do it again for anyone who needed me. It took only 3 days to dismantle 3 years of cruelty, 3 days of planning, documenting, and confronting. 3 days of becoming a version of myself I had never been required to reveal, though perhaps it had always existed inside me. Grant Mercer is shattered now. His comfortable facade has collapsed. His reputation is ruined, his family scattered, his finances drained. Every month when he mails that child support payment, he is reminded of what he squandered. Not because I stole anything from him, but because he destroyed it himself. He had a caring spouse, a bright daughter, and a peaceful home, and he wrecked all of it with his temper, his entitlement, and his need for dominance. Eleanor learned that enabling harm makes you responsible for it. She lost her son, her granddaughter, her house, and the savings she guarded more fiercely than her conscience. Lila learned that bullying collapses when the foundation of fear is removed. She lost her comfort, her support system, and her imagined authority. Now she is back with her ex-husband, repeating the same dysfunction she once inflicted on others. Raymond learned that he is stronger than he knew. That he deserves peace, dignity, and love. That surviving does not make him weak, it makes him extraordinary. And Sophia learned that the men in her family are protectors, not threats. She learned that safety is real, that laughter is allowed, and that her grandfather is someone who will always fight for her future. And I learned that sometimes goodness requires breaking rules. That justice and legality are not always aligned. That the most important battles are fought for the people we love. My name is Edwin Harrow. I am 70 years old. I am a retired criminal defense attorney who spent 3 days impersonating my twin brother to free him from his violent son-in-law. And I would do it again without hesitation. If this story resonates with you, if it stirs anger, hope, or determination, I ask you to let your voice be heard. Tap the like button so this message reaches others who may need strength. Subscribe if you want more stories about resilience, truth, and people rising against cruelty. And share in the comments where you are watching from, or whether you or someone you know has lived through something similar. Your words may reach someone who feels alone, someone who cannot yet speak for themselves. We are building a community here, a network of survivors, supporters, and people who refuse to look away when harm is done. Silence is the breath abusers live on. Silence keeps them powerful. Silence lets them continue without consequence. So let's make noise together. Let's talk openly about domestic violence, about the cracks in the system, about the compassionate ways justice can be forged when traditional paths fail. My brother is safe now. He is healing, rebuilding his life with courage. And every risk I took, every line I crossed, was truly worth it for that freedom. Let me know in the comments where you have watched it from and if you liked my story. It inspires us to share more such stories with you.